get you in a second. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this Signal Hour. I am Chris Martenson, one of your hosts. I'm the co-host of this, along with Evie.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good to be here.
They're right there, along with all of us. So we're going to be talking about a lot of things today. Remember, the Signal Hour is where we're trying to find the signal within the signal. And for us, that's been X a lot lately. But of course, the mainstream media provides a very useful anti-signal. Often they are discussing something in a way that tells us that it's absolutely not the thing that we should be looking at, and or they're just framing it wrong. Boy, do we have a doozy for you on that front today. And it's about pharmaceuticals, vaccines. What an astonishing, absolute travesty of logic and justice, and of course, humanity. We're going to be discussing that. So with that.
Good. So glad you could be here with us. I appreciate that everybody takes time away from their day to be here and join us. I know that you all probably have very busy lives like we do, and this is an but we appreciate that we get to be part of your day. And the more of us there are, I think the stronger we are. So I'm really grateful for all the people I've met through this channel and because of Peak Prosperity, the company that we run. We have a website if you're ever interested in hearing more about us and the work we do in the world, peakprosperity.com. You can come and join the discussion there. And behind the paywall, we have so many more things going on, tons and tons of forums and places where you can discuss whatever's on your mind and in your heart with other intellectual, well-intentioned, and very bright people there who have common sense. So
Indeed. And you know what we're going to have to do today, Evie?
What's that?
We're going to have to get the data paddle back out. The data paddle.
My mic is not right. So
that's I'm sure absolutely true. So
Sorry.
Now it is.
It was configured for
right.
for a one-man show.
One-man show. So here's where we're remember, for Peak Prosperity members, this is actually Signal 2 hours. It goes one goes into the other. So the public Signal Hour out here with everybody in the public side. And of course, if you're at Peak Prosperity, we carry on. This is what's going to be in part 2. We have to talk about Trump's economy. Early stage says it's winning. That's going to drive a lot of people nuts. Evie and I have been going into building local resilience. We're going to talk about what we're doing here on our own homestead and how we're building resilience, and also locally. And it looks like Alberta, Canada is heading towards a divorce. So the first national divorce, surprisingly not in the United States, but actually in Canada, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What
do you see? What do you see? What I've Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. I enjoy the data paddle. It's been a while.
Somebody has my back. Update that title slide. Evie is co-host.
Title slide. I know. Are you listening, everybody? Let's get this going. All right. So here's where I want to start today.
Sure.
Actually, Evie, there was an attempted coup. And this has all been revealed. I don't know why there haven't been arrests. I don't know what's going on.
What? Just recently? A new one?
Well, this is related back to the original. How many Trump impeachments have there been? This is related to the first Trump impeachment. Okay.
Oh,
and so this has
see.
been out for a while. People have been following it. No, this is out for a while, but suddenly it's back up and out again. And this time with Michael Schellenberger he's a great reporter, doing some really good reporting here with Jesse Waters on Fox.
You have this new piece on Substack that the USAID and the CIA helped orchestrate Trump's impeachment.
Yeah, I mean, Jesse, it's a crazy story. I mean, you might forget that, the House of Representatives impeached President Trump in December of 2019. Many people may not remember that it was a CIA analyst who was left over from the Obama White House who wrote the memo that led to the impeachment. It was all based on hearsay. The person had not actually been in the room with Trump. Nonetheless, this memo that he wrote relied heavily on a report done by an organization funded by USAID. In fact, its initial founding funding, I mean, now it's tens of millions of dollars, had gone into this group called the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project.
Okay, so there's USAID, funded principally, as we now know, by Democrats as sort of a make-work grifty NGO operation, right? Funds tens of millions into this investigating crimes thing. They write this completely fake report about Trump, who then a CIA analyst happens to overhear somebody talking about it in the White House. So pure hearsay. reports that out
Ooh.
through the CIA, who then feeds it over to Adam Schiff, and we get to an indictment. The first Trump impeachment.
Wow.
This is what it looks like in a banana republic. This is full on, full stop, third world, just lawfare. Remember all those people screaming, "Oh my God, Trump's going to weaponize lawfare." This is
it.
what it actually is.
This is it right here.
This is it.
Yep.
This is it.
Oh
a
my
name that's not
gosh.
very memorable, OCCRP, but it was basically created as an extension of the State Department and then of USAID. And as you know, Jesse, this is very serious to be involved in an effort to do regime change at home, as we've been discovering as the files have come out with what Elon Musk has been doing. We know that USAID was really about regime change abroad. It was a kind of public-facing part, regime change operation like CIA, but not covert, more overt. Well, now you see a similar blowback, just like they did censorship abroad and brought censorship tools back home. They were doing this sort of thing abroad, creating a predicate essentially for Trump's impeachment. So I think it's just one of many revelations that we'll see coming out in the next few weeks.
USAID was involved in regime change abroad and here at home. Very interesting.
USAID involved in regime change abroad and at home. That's what just happened.
That's not supposed to happen.
No.
That's
No.
frustrating. That's not right.
Pretty much not right. So, but remember this all the way back from 2019.
Okay.
We've known about this stuff.
Right. Kevin Shipp saying, where is CIA Director Gina Haspel? A CIA analyst, Eric
Nobody can pronounce it.
Chiaramella,
I think.
any Italians can help me out here, violated CIA regulations by using his position to engage in political operations against a sitting president. And Haspel knows Chiaramella is not a legitimate whistleblower. Your move, Gina.
Now, we should also point out here that Gina also sat on Event 201. She's also known through hearsay. Again, I have no direct knowledge that she ran torture programs as well. So she's all around your deep state. Just
you can tell her eyes are cold.
Yeah, this is not a good person, not a good human at all. And so that's why I did title this section "The Enemies Within." We have enemies within. This is not a person who's working for the better interests of this country and its people.
Right.
You can, that much is clear.
You can get the sense of that.
So then, go ahead and read that. And then I got a little video to play real quick.
Sure. Brian Fraser says, John Ratcliffe, director of the Central Agency, has unequivocally confirmed that Senator Adam Schiff manipulated impeachment whistleblower Eric Chiaramella in an effort to remove the sitting president from office.
So this is a little wonky to listen into this because Ratcliffe is very careful and he speaks very sort of lawyery terms, but let's see if we can sort of listen through.
I can tell you one thing that we've learned very clearly, and that is that the Inspector General for the intelligence community can provide no information about the contacts between the Hipsy majority and the whistleblower prior to his involvement. So the only way that we'll be able to get that information is from the Hipsy majority themselves. They are fact witnesses in the same investigation that they are now running. Nowhere else in the United States of America can you be both a fact witness and the prosecutor or investigation in anything, much less an investigation to remove a president from office. It's entirely inappropriate. And Chairman Schiff should be disqualified from running an investigation where his...
All right, he says inappropriate. You say inappropriate, I say illegal. It's not just inappropriate. You're not supposed to be judge, jury, executioner, right? But you're also not supposed to be chief prosecutor and witness at the same time. And he was coaching and manipulated the impeachment whistleblower who actually didn't have anything to blow the whistle on because he had no direct reports. He had hearsay that allegedly he had heard. So this is just some guy who, by the way, went to Yale, Eric Chiaramella, and he's fully in the bed of the deep state and the whole DNC apparatus.
He's
so
in bed with all those.
Yeah, this is not a whistleblower per se, right? But of all the whistleblowers who've ever been, like we've had good whistleblowers before in this country, right? So Edward Snowden, fantastic, revealed things, true illegality. Of course, now the deep state hates him, wants him to come back and go to prison forever. The good whistleblowers get attacked. The bad whistleblowers, nothing's
true.
happened to this Eric Ciaramella guy. He's just floating around,
Doing his thing,
doing his thing.
doing more of it, probably.
But you can't be both the fact witness and the prosecutor, and we would call that inappropriate.
That seems kind of obvious, doesn't it?
It
I don't
should.
know.
There he is. That's what he would look like if you saw a picture of an Eric Ciaramella. And by
What
the
a
way,
Chad.
I'm just going to say that name again, Eric Ciaramella, because they go out of their way to not talk about him in the news. They call him a
Right.
CIA whistleblower. He has a name, right?
Mhm.
And by the way, he this is his most recent bio that I could find at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And they should put two quotes around the peace, because Carnegie Endowment works to whip up wars and create trouble
That's
wherever
right.
it goes.
His work focuses on Ukraine and Russia.
Ukraine and Russia.
Of course it does.
Of course it does. Yale and then Harvard. I mean, talk about a double whammy. Absolutely unhireable as far as I'm concerned, but
Mhm.
I'm not a
I
deep
know,
state.
isn't that weird? It's like those, Yale and Harvard used to be places of deep respect, to
Mhm.
be a scholar in one of those places. And now it's like, oh, you've been through that kind of mind virus training? Like, I'm all set. No, thank you.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
wow.
So I agree with this. I think that's
Yep.
probably what happened there.
TV says color revolution held in the USA. Thanks, USAID.
AKA CIA, AKA Clown World.
Clown World.
Totally. No, it
Wow.
is. That's where we're at. And so we just have to point these things out. Now, the reason for pointing these things out all the time for me
Mhm.
is because I'm just trying to help people orient to the idea that this whole thing is crumbling. Our entire
Right.
experiment has been revealed to be a fraud. We're not the good guys. We're not necessarily the bad guys, but we've lost our way. We are no longer a shining light on the hill, shining city on
Right.
the hill,
A
doing
beacon
good
of
things for the world.
freedom
you know?
and liberty.
Well,
Yeah.
what did we see in the JFK papers? Not a lot about the JFK assassination, but we did find out the CIA was busy doing things like single-handedly deciding to attempt to start a nuclear war with China by blowing up its first nuclear power plant all on its own. It decided, what would be a good idea? We could use biological agents to destroy Vietnam's rice crops so we can starve the people, because creating famine seems to serve our interests, right? These are evil things.
They are.
Objectively
Of a rogue
evil
agency.
things. Like, as a citizen of the United States, I don't want to pay for that. I wouldn't vote for it. I wouldn't authorize it. I would say, no, bad idea.
Mhm.
Find another way to achieve what you want in the world. I don't know. Talk to people,
Mhm.
find out what they want, find out what we want. It's called diplomacy,
Mm.
negotiation.
Right. Negotiation. That's been lost, that word,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So anyway, one last time, Eric Ciaramella.
Eric Ciaramella. Yeah, that one right there.
This one?
Yes.
All
I
right.
think Candace Owens might have mentioned this as well. Viv says everyone should read this book, Wall Street, the Nazis and the Crimes of the Deep State by David Hughes. It all really got rolling after World War II. It's so disgusting.
Well, it is a deeply corrupt system now at this point in time. So
And there's some good books out there that give various perspectives.
they
about
do.
it.
I would love to read that one. So thanks for that, Viv B. Now I want to turn to this thing. The pharmashills just go nuts. So every so often they like get so wrapped around the axle that they just lose the plot. And so here they've just gone completely nuts. But now we can see it for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really astonishing. So I consider the people who are pro-vaccine to be a religious order because they operate with an article of faith. You should be able to scratch back to get to where they're like these, like
Right.
aluminum as an adjuvant is safe. And you start scratching at that. They say, well, we all know because there are all these studies and they also show it's safe, but they all cite the same study, which is a 1996 study done in a few rats where they didn't
Right.
give the aluminum intramuscularly, they gave it intraparenterally. So
Right.
it's totally different absorption, different
By mouth,
excretion.
it's protected.
Yeah, you don't absorb it.
No.
But this
not
is
the same.
100% absorption. This is like 0.3%.
Yep,
And,
yep.
and they point to that. And even with that, they had to throw some data out because it showed it wasn't totally safe. Right. And that's
Right.
it. The whole thing is built on that. Thousands of papers
Right.
reference this one study in 26 rats. And it's
And-
just stupid.
And it's all
Okay.
predicated on that. I get what you mean about it being kind of an article of faith. You have to.
Well, they say we know they're safe and effective. That's why it would be illegitimate to test them properly. Well, let's go into the story because this is
All right,
funkadoo.
let's
Okay.
go.
We had three major newspapers. I got two of them here. The Washington Post.
Mm-hmm. RFK Jr. will order placebo testing for new vaccines alarming health experts.
Alarming.
Alarming
They're
health
just-
experts.
Just alarmed. What else would they be?
Wow.
They're always alarmed.
The potential change outlined in a statement would require all new vaccines to undergo placebo testing, sparking concerns among medical experts.
Oh no, placebo testing. You mean the thing that every other drug
Wow.
ever has to go through? If you can't beat the sugar pill, you're not actually a legit drug. You mean
Yeah.
placebo testing? You mean the thing that all drugs go through? But we're talking about not just a drug, like a heart medication. You might take it, and if it doesn't work out, it gets excreted. We're talking about something that rewires your immune system, the most complicated
Right.
system in your body. And that's the one that we've decided that one, maybe
And
we
if
should, no placebo testing for that one.
It potentially changes your DNA too,
Well,
depending on what happens.
Now that we're giving these DNA contaminated shots, it does
You
potentially.
know?
I mean, but
What?
so
Wow.
anyway, just there
Okay.
alone, we could stop and say, okay, this is retarded. And it's amazing. By the way, you see there 2,304 comments.
Yeah,
So
looks like people are jazzed up about it.
yeah. All right. So
Yes. So
here we go.
you want me to read this whole thing? All right.
Yeah. Every word is just sort of delicious.
All right. All right. Let's go for it. The HHS statement raised, excuse me, concerns among medical and public health experts who said the move could be a significant shift in how the country has ensured the safety of vaccines for decades.
Okay, ensured the safety though. What do they mean by the significant shift in how we've ensured? I don't think they know what this word ensured means. This word
sounds kind of vague.
I do not think it means what you think it means. It's like, the way
know,
you
right?
ensure the safety of something is you run safety tests against a placebo.
Right.
But they're like, but a significant shift in how we've ensured the safety, right?
Mhm. As well as cast doubt on vaccines that are safe
That are safe.
and effective and key to public health.
Look at the assertions in there. They can feel like a 3-year-old
Yeah.
in a candy aisle here at the store. They're
gosh.
safe. They're effective. Key to public health, right? These are all assertions. And when you scratch at all of these, they all fall apart very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right.
The potential change comes as public trust in vaccines continues to decline amid a growing measles outbreak and worries over Kennedy's mixed messaging about immunizations.
So whose worries? Which worries exactly?
I-
They're just these vague worries. We have these there are these worries out there, amid a growing measles outbreak. When you put it in context, I didn't bring the clip in, but Kennedy put it in context. He's like, so we have like 390 cases right now in the US, same amount in Canada. And by the way, we have 1 million children right now who are in metabolic distress.
Who are
and or who have
obese.
autism.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
390 cases, which by the way, resolve unless the child is literally treated with malpractice.
Right.
They live.
Nothing bad happens.
Yeah. When I was born, those first few years, there were a couple million cases of measles every year. And all we ever got was remember we showed the Brady Bunch episode. We're like, oh, cool, Mom, I got measles. I get to stay home for 3 days. Like that's what it was when I was growing up. Now it's like, oh no. Amid measles,
The dreaded measles.
There's the measles, a growing measles outbreak, and they just throw that out there. This is disgusting to me.
That's fear porn right there.
Anybody who's writing this, if you are the author of this, you're a journalist, you suck at your job and you should lose your job. And by the way, whatever education system you went to should be dismantled because it effed up. Okay, this is not just a little bit wrong. This lacks so much context. You're like one of the cloud people floating around at a Grateful Dead show, when they had them still back in the day.
All right, I'll finish this. Medical and public health experts also expressed dismay that the testing change could require coronavirus vaccines and potentially others to undergo costly and, in their view, unnecessary studies that would probably limit vaccine production and access and leave more Americans at risk of preventable disease.
All right, so look at that. So this is an astonishing word salad here.
Wow, it is.
That says nothing at all, right?
Isn't this insane?
And suddenly they're worried about, it's costly. It could be costly testing. Suddenly we worry about costs. Where's the worry about the money that goes to Israel or Ukraine or into the F-35 program?
Or where's the money to help the people that are damaged from these vaccines because they weren't adequately studied in the first place? Where's that money?
Left unsaid. So that was the Washington Post. Same thing.
Yeah.
This is in the Boston Globe again, but now when you see it in multiple outlets, This
it's
is
propaganda.
a pharma propaganda operation. It's not like suddenly all the journalists woke up and said, we're going to put not 1, not 2, not 3, but they put 4 journalists up against this, right? And the Boston Globe reruns it. And then I saw there's been dozens of people are tasked with writing these really important things because the experts are alarmed.
Oh boy. So carrying on, Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. intends to shift the way vaccines are tested, a move that the agency said will increase transparency. But that, and this is the part to be highlighted, that medical experts fear could limit access to vaccines and undermine the public's trust in immunization, depending on its implementation.
Depending on its implementation, I think actually it's depending on what it finds. It's going to increase transparency and people will know if these things actually are safe or not. And they could actually have proper informed consents, but we're worried that could undermine the public's trust. They're giving it away. They're telling you right up. We're worried that if we test these things honestly, we're going to find stuff out that will make people legitimately question whether they want to take this thing into their body or not.
Right. And you know what the problem with that is? It's not that they're going to become hesitant because they actually care about you. It's because they're going to lose money.
Yeah.
That's what this all boils down to. The potential change outlined in a statement says all new vaccines will be required to undergo placebo testing, a procedure in which some people receive the vaccine and others receive an inert substance, such as a saline shot, before the results are compared.
Oh, the world is ending. Be still, my heart. Come on, this is insane. Like, they're going forward with this. This is what they're going with right now.
It's unbelievable.
They're worried that oh no, we're gonna see some people will receive a placebo, and this is really gonna upend how we do things.
This is so good.
Radical departure from past practice.
Yeah, I have to read this. This is so good.
In yellow.
Okay.
Yeah, get this one.
But I have to get that other one too.
Oh, do you? Okay.
All new vaccines will undergo safety testing in placebo-controlled trials prior to licensure. A radical departure from best practices.
It's
sorry.
It's a radical. Give me a little radical.
No, I mean that it's just they're throwing themselves under the bus. It's like, oh my gosh, how could they ask us to do safety testing? This is just unbelievable.
Well, HHS said, yeah, this is radical. It's radical. This is what RFK said he was going to bring. And by the way, that's exactly what I voted for. That right there. 100%.
Yes.
We just want the data. This was Kennedy's thing the whole time was we're just going to get the data.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, not the data. And he's like, yeah, the data. And they're like, oh, but what about the science? He's like, we're actually going to do science, not the science, right?
Not your science.
Not your science. Our science.
Our democracy. Okay. Vaccines for new pathogens are often tested this way, but for well-researched diseases such as measles and polio, public health experts say it makes little sense to do that and can be unethical because the placebo group would not receive a known effective intervention.
How do we know? If you haven't tested it, how do you know? Because the sum total, so medicine's a little tricky this way. You might be able to give a shot and say, look, and by the way, they almost never actually test for outcomes in vaccines. They give them to you, and then they measure that you have antibodies, that it created an antibody response. And they say, well, since we know antibodies are part of the immune system, we're just going to trust that
means
all
it
worked out.
Right.
But what you really would want to do, widen the lens a tiny bit. You give the shot, and then you track, and you say, on balance, did more kids live than die than we would have expected? And so they had the DTP vaccine in Africa under a certain formulation. And when they ran that next layer of tests, they discovered, oh no, many more people were dying, kids were dying than expected. So they had to pull it, but not before parents had to notice lots of kids died and there was a big brouhaha, and that was a whole Gates funded fiasco. But then you might widen it out one layer further and say, over the course of a person's life, on balance, is that really helping or not? Or over the course of 5 years or 10 years?
Right.
Because it turns out that when you get exposed to measles, your body sees that. It's a known thing in our long evolutionary cycle, and your body really dials up your immune system. So people who've had measles tend to have a lower future rate of things like cancer. because cancer, of course, requires a surveillance of the immune system.
Right. Oh,
So
that's
if you said
interesting.
it on balance, you're like, oh, but that's why they narrow the window down. Oh, look, they have measles antibodies. That's what we're after. And the truth is that you might have gotten that, but then more people die of cancer. So on balance,
Right.
you know,
Right.
to answer those questions, you have to be curious. You have to gather some data.
And you have
go.
to track people for longer than like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know?
But Kennedy said some stuff, truthfully, that was totally unforgivable.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Yeah.
Kennedy has long disparaged vaccines, said they are not adequately safety tested, and previously called for placebo testing for vaccines that are approved for use. Secretary Kennedy is not anti-vaccine. He is pro-safety, pro-transparency, and pro-accountability.
The CAD.
HHS said in a
That's
statement.
terrible. How can we live in a world where somebody's pro-safety, transparency, and accountability? That's unacceptable. But
Wow.
look at this. Look at the language. So this is propaganda speak 101.
Mm-hmm.
Has long disparaged.
Yeah.
Now, you might disparage a cheating spouse. You might disparage, a hated neighbor. You don't disparage a vaccine by saying,
Right.
well, we haven't tested it for safety
Yeah, that
adequately.
isn't disparagement,
That's
is
not
it?
disparagement. That's not. But this is framing words here. Okay?
Yeah.
This is propaganda 101.
Propaganda.
All right. So here we carry on.
Oh no, more. The HHS statement raised concerns among medical and public health experts who said the move could be a significant shift in how the country has ensured the safety of vaccines for decades, as well as cast doubt on vaccines that are safe, effective, and key to public
So
health.
they lifted that same sentence from the other article.
Yeah,
So there's
it
a little
sounds
borrowing
almost the
going on here.
same. Yep.
Yeah, go to the next yellow one.
Yep. Medical and public health experts also expressed dismay that the testing change could require
Oh, we read that one
coronavirus
too.
vaccines, potentially others, to undergo costly and, in their
Mhm.
view, unnecessary studies that would probably limit vaccine production and access, blah, blah, blah. You are watching the gradual dissolution of the vaccine infrastructure in this country, said Paul Offit.
Whoa. The vaccine
dissolution.
infrastructure.
Yeah, what is that?
What is that? A high-speed rail system? The vaccine infrastructure.
That's weird.
Oh no, the gradual dissolution of the vaccine infrastructure.
The goal, he thinks, is to make vaccines less available and less affordable. Yeah, that's
That's
what
the goal.
Kennedy said.
That's the goal. So he's going to
Yeah.
assign a motive to this. So Kennedy's just said, listen, we're going to test these things against placebos. Let the chips fall where they may.
Yep, which is fair. I think that's fair.
And Dr. Paul Offit, of course, he is actually the Dr.
Is
Mengele
he
of
a
our time.
pharma shill?
He's one of the worst of the worst. This gentleman is going to burn in hell 30 times over, as far as I'm concerned. But this is the banality of evil. That's, as Hannah Arendt would say, that's what an evil guy looks like. And you're like, he looks
normal.
he looks very unthreatening, and he comes across very unthreatening. But he is, he's just not. He's a terrible guy, horrible human being. So Kennedy said, suggested that big pharma influences vaccine policy, and look what he says there.
There's not a single shred of evidence showing that is
Not
true.
a single shred. There's about 3 billion shreds.
Oh my goodness.
Technically, I'm right. Anyway.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
But
So, lastly, except for the COVID vaccine, none of the vaccines on the CDC's childhood recommended schedule was tested against an inert placebo, meaning we know very little about the actual risk profiles of these products.
So consider that none have been tested on the vaccine schedule for children. None.
I can't believe I gave any of those to my children.
I know. I knowing what I know now, I'd be like,
Wow.
I'd say, show me all the dying Amish kids, and they'd be like, oh, we don't want you looking at
they're
them.
the healthiest kids
they're
ever.
way healthier than our kids.
I know.
But it's not the vaccine, say the religious nuts. But no, those are safe and effective. They're like, you can hear it. So here's the rule: when you're talking data with somebody, they might get passionate, but they don't become irrational, illogical. When you're talking belief systems with people, they get emotional very quickly. And there's usually no logic under that because it's an article of faith. And I get that. You can hold things in faith. That's fine, but you should admit that, right?
Right.
My religious views are articles of faith for me.
Right.
And that's okay. So I can hold them as articles of faith.
That's true. It actually does kind of fall into that category, right? Because you're believing in something you can't see and you can't test and you actually don't really fully understand.
Well, you have no data for it, so you have nothing to
Right.
suggest that it's
But
true.
vaccines are like that in this case.
Just speaking of the banality of evil, one more.
All right. Sean O'Leary, going against the science. Vaccine and public health experts said the statement from HHS is a combination of misinformation and exaggeration or misrepresentation of scientific studies.
And you have to qualify that. When you say it's a blanket, this thing is a combination of misinformation, exaggeration, or misrepresentation of scientific studies. Which scientific studies? Name one.
That's right.
And explain how.
Right.
Oh, no, they're wrong. Here are the 5 studies where they tested these childhood vaccines on a long-term basis or even any basis against an inert placebo.
This is lazy thinking and lazier journalism, as far as I'm concerned.
It totally is. And by the way, I hold these people in contempt for being this bad at their jobs. This would be like, if you could be a pilot who crashed planes routinely into mountains and somehow survive, that's the equivalent of these folks.
There it is. Exactly. Quote, to make a blanket statement like that, I think that would go against the science, said Sean O'Leary, a pediatric infectious disease physician and chair of the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Infectious Diseases.
And it bears pointing out that the American Academy of Pediatrics is also in support of gender affirming care and
great, mutilating children.
And giving kids ADHD meds and all the rest. Whatever it is, if there's anything that they can promote that actually, when you peel it back, is just another way for pharma to sell more drugs on a lifetime basis to chronically destroyed and ill children.
Yep.
That's what you get. But anyway, I love how he was kind enough to say, I think that would go against the science. So you see how I've spelled the science up top there?
Yes.
The science is like
going against the science.
We have to protect the science so that we can defend our democracy.
It really is coming down to that, isn't it?
That is what this whole thing is. It's really that bad. Okay.
Wow.
Now we're going to turn to Jeff Childers. So Jeff Childers, I love how this guy writes. Anybody, if you are not watching, reading him on Substack, he puts out literally daily. It is such good writing. I really love this. So he puts out this one on Thursday of this week, May 1st, today being May 2nd. And so I love how he framed this. He said, yesterday, the Boston Globe ran a story headlined, which we've just been talking about, RFK Jr. will order placebo testing for new vaccines, alarming the health experts. What would we do without alarmed health experts, he asks. Is there any other kind? Anyway, not only was the Globe's article another fine example of journalistic malpractice, but for careful readers, it accidentally cut the vaccine industrial complex's femoral artery.
Oopsie.
Oopsie.
I hate when that happens.
So, he quotes the same thing we did, but he said the experts offered 3 basic arguments. First, they argued it's unethical to withhold a known vaccine from people who need protection. And they always offer kids and measles. That's their go-to. Kids and measles. Second, they said placebo-controlled trials are expensive, take longer than antibody trials, potentially slowing vaccines' time to market. And third, they unironically argued some drugs might not make it. And that, my friends, is the point. Michael Ulsterholm, another banality of evil kind of guy of the University of Minnesota, an expert on Biden's transition team, said the change threatened the existence of coronavirus vaccines. And Jeff writes, I'm not sure Ulsterholm realized what he was admitting there. If COVID jabs can't survive a placebo-controlled trial, then they shouldn't be sold. That's just common sense.
That's right. Common sense. It's common sense.
Common sense. But this is the most illogical thing. They're saying, look, we already know they work, so there's no need to test them. They're saying, well, we'd like to test them anyway. They're like, well, no, because that might harm people's desire to take them.
Right.
Which is an admission that we might find things by testing them that invalidate your first assertion, which is they're safe, proven safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Or that they might not make it. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Anyway, they're freaking out, and as they should. And of course, the media is freaking out because the media gets huge pharma bucks. And of course, that's the point of pharma doesn't advertise on TV and in the print so that you read about some crazy psoriasis medicine and demand it from your doctor. The doctor's already bought and paid for. They're going to give it to you anyway. They do that so that the newspapers won't write articles critical of them because they don't want to lose all those tasty advertising dollars. That's it. The whole thing, it just reveals that we are a nation of, by, and for money.
Mm-hmm. Amen. There it is, sadly.
There it is.
I think that's right.
Big stuff came out this week too. This was kind of fun. I call it
China syndrome.
China syndrome. So listen to this. This is pretty extraordinary. So Tulsi Gabbard on with Megyn Kelly just came out the other day.
To see but haven't, COVID and its origins. I'm sure you saw that just before we sat down tonight, the Chinese State Council Information Office, I don't even want to know what that is, but it sounds bad. They have determined that COVID came from us, that it's more likely than not that COVID originated in the United States and not in China. I'm wondering whether you have any dispute with that based on what you've seen over here. The intelligence community has been responsible for trying to figure out in part how this thing started.
All right. So China says, nuh-uh, you guys made it, right? And of course, the only thing you can say is, no way, right?
Mm-hmm.
That should be the, nuh-uh.
Nuh-uh. That's what I always say when I
So let's see let's see how Tulsi handles this.
So I created a kind of a special teams group, the Directors Initiative group, that is focused on investigating a number of the president's top priorities and the things that the American people really deserve and want to know the truth about. The origins of COVID-19 is one of them. So they're actively working on that. A lot of the work that's been done is on covid.gov. Have you had a chance to look? Oh, Trump changed it. It's quite a transformation of the website. For anybody watching, if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's the annoying website to which YouTube and all social media used to.
So she asked a direct question. China says we created COVID. And Tulsi says, we're looking into that.
Yeah, she didn't say no.
She didn't say no. That's a seismic shift in this story.
Wow.
Okay. Now, so I was curious. I'm like, well, what is that? What is that thing they were referring to? So I found it, of course, you know me. There's the State Council Information Office, and I skipped a whole bunch, but this April 30th, it's released from China, right?
Uh-huh.
It's the State Council Information Office, whatever that is, of the People's Republic of China.
Yep.
And they had a bunch of, we're going to go through some of the earlier sections, but you get to section 4.
Okay.
And look at that right there.
All right. Numerous studies have shown that SARS-CoV-2 originated outside China.
Oops. Okay. So this could be part of trade negotiations. We don't know, right? Or
Sure.
They just don't want to be fingered with this whole thing. But But if we remember back to COVID, it allegedly erupted in China. That's where we first noticed it. But you'll see there's some data presented here that maybe that's not true.
Right.
But we went with this whole, and Trump at the time, this is the China virus, right? And all that. But the WHO, not TO, HO, refused to stop flights from China, even though we knew there was some spread there and all of this and that. And so the whole story is it came from China, and then you have to argue, was it a lab leak or was it a natural origin?
Right.
Did a pangolin get in an orgy with a bat? And all that. And then this kind of flips all that on the head. So we're going to have this different conversation, which is this. Numerous studies have shown that it originated outside China. So that's what they're leading with here.
Mm-hmm. And then they go on to say, from May to October 2019, Virginia reported 19 respiratory disease outbreaks, a significant increase from the 13 and 15 outbreaks recorded during the same period in the previous 2 years. Laboratory tests were unable to identify the causes of some cases. In July 2019, 2 communities in northern Virginia reported outbreaks of pneumonia with unknown causes, which local media suspected to be a mystery virus. A total of 54 people exhibited symptoms such as fever, coughing, feebleness, resulting in 2 deaths. That same month, the Fort Detrick Biological Laboratory, located just 1 hour's drive from the affected area, was suddenly shut down.
Whoops, there it is.
Uh-oh.
So China's throwing it back and saying, well, you guys are doing this stuff too. They're all still actually avoiding the thing, which is actually, look, China was collaborating with the United States. It was both of us, right? It was Ralph Baric out of UNC and their whole coronavirus lab thing there. It was NIH, it was Fauci funneling money. Right. There was some Canadian people in on this whole thing. Anyway, that was true, and it was true that they were working on it over there. But they're starting to lay the case here of saying, well, the official story is it broke out in December of 2019 in a wet market
Right.
in China, but they're going to present evidence here that says, well, wait a minute, from May to October of 2019, you had some weird respiratory things going on over here.
Do you, all right, this is just a crazy question, but do you think that they're just mad, like based on when this was published? Are they just mad about other things going on, like the tariffs and this and that?
Yes,
And so
that's how I
now
interpret this.
They're like, oh, we're not going to keep, like if it is a secret to be kept, they're like, okay, that's it. We're all done.
Yeah. So there's a lot of truth to be revealed here. I want to remember, ever since I found out that China was lying to us so comprehensively about COVID back, remember the people falling over in the streets and shaking in their chairs and all that stuff.
Terrifying.
Turned out that was just a bunch of junk, right? So everything from China is on double secret probation with me right now. So let's read it with that lens. But I think this is telling us some stuff that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Including this.
Failure to provide a timely and effective response to COVID-19 is the title of this. In January 2020, the U.S. was aware that an epidemic of a novel coronavirus was spreading quickly within its borders. Choosing to downplay the severity of the epidemic, the U.S. government on multiple occasions compared COVID-19 to the flu, saying that it would disappear automatically one day.
That was Trump. Trump said that. He's like, it'll be here and then it'll go.
Yeah, I remember that.
Gone, right? But yeah, remember there was the flu, bro?
Yeah, it's just the flu.
It's the flu. So it's true. We downplayed the whole severity of that thing. But then
that's when you were fighting to get people to pay attention.
Yeah, and that's when Wikipedia took my page down because I was saying, no, it's not the flu. But anyway, and when it says it also accused the WHO of overestimating its fatality rate, it's talking about the government of the time, which is Trump's government.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
So here it is beating up on Trump. So again, tariffs, they're unhappy with Trump. So clearly negative on Trump. Look, the government said it would disappear one day.
Right.
And look at that last part in yellow right down there, right?
It also accused the WHO of overestimating its fatality rate and advocating the use of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin as wonder drugs without solid scientific evidence. This led to drug abuse and delayed the proper treatment of patients.
All right, this is crap.
This is crazy.
This is crazy time right here, right? Here they're just trying to dunk on Trump, right? But there's another thing that's happening here, and it gets super awkward when we get into this part of this. Here they're telling the story. Okay.
All right. Have to hold on to your hats, I guess. After the Democratic Party came to power, the U.S. government adjusted its pandemic response policies. However, a political pandemic of partisanship over life was spreading.
Partisanship over life.
I had not heard that before. Some politicians from the defeated Republican Party began to encourage and spread vaccine conspiracy theories, inciting resistance to and skepticism about vaccines among the public. Their manipulation of public sentiment severely weakened the country's pandemic prevention and control. In June 2022, when Omicron variant reached its infection peak, only 67.2% of the U.S. population were fully vaccinated with 2 doses, ranking last among the G7 countries and 59th globally. Addressing the malfunctioning U.S. government response in the early stages of the pandemic, one American economist commented that from the moment the pandemic was first identified, the U.S. president and his team had downplayed the crisis and ignored basic and widely known public health guidelines. He urged the U.S. government to examine the available data, identify the failures, and call out its relentless misinformation.
I would just like to put on the record that I am not that American economist, and I'd be deeply embarrassed if it turned out that my statements were being used by the Chinese Communist Party as an example of the proper things to say. But see what they're saying? They're very clearly saying, oh, look, the Democrats did a good job. Now, I find it super awkward because if I was the party that a communist party was like, hey, these guys are awesome. These are the people you should be following. I'd be like, oh, that's kind of puts it in sharp relief, doesn't it?
Well, we've had politicians on the left actually saying that they like the way that or maybe it was Trudeau. Somebody was like, worshiping the way Canada did things and sort of getting off thinking about it.
Authoritarian, right? So they love the authoritarian angle. So an authoritarian government is saying Trump bad, Democrats good.
Right.
If I'm the Democrats, it's time for a little soul searching about
Mhm.
now. You know, if all of a sudden you wake up one day and Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy are saying, you're a good person, like you want to back up, maybe reevaluate what's
Mhm.
going on. But by the way, so all this thing, oh no, they vaccine hesitancy, and look, these people weren't masking and staying 6 feet apart, but the vaccines, you were only 67% vaccinated. That's terrible because, as we all know, that led to terrible outcome. Oh, wait.
Oh, reminder, vaccines were not correlated with better outcomes. Experts puzzled by
Baffled.
why
Baffled.
Haiti has one of the lowest COVID-19 death rates in the world despite administering 0 vaccine doses. We don't know.
We don't know. Right?
Yes.
So this whole idea that vaccines were like unequivocally good and led to great outcomes, as a scientist, this is science. You have to answer this question. Now you would have to say what happened here, right? Were people actually dying of COVID, and or were we misreporting them?
Right.
Like anybody who died,
or
we just
were
called
we
it COVID.
killing them when they went into the hospital with whatever the symptoms of this thing was?
Or who knows, maybe being in an equatorial-ish place and getting lots of sun and vitamin D was the deciding factor that was more important than vaccines. But remember, these vaccine people are always like, you're confusing correlation with causation. Like, oh no, just because all those people didn't die while they were on ivermectin, that doesn't prove anything. Then they're like, oh yeah, we have all these proofs that the vaccines work. And then you say, no, you don't. And they go, oh, well, in this case, correlation does equal causation. Just not
this
in
one time.
Just not in this instance.
I know.
That it's just totally illogical. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Just read the part in yellow.
Sure.
I think. Yeah.
To this end, some politicians refused to wear masks in public. They were among the first to defy pandemic control protocols and undermine sensible precautions, such as mask wearing and social distancing, by portraying them as matters of individual choice. This further desynchronized the pandemic prevention and control efforts of the U.S.
All right. But this is China, like sticking to, they're literally channeling what I would call Democrat talking points at this time, right?
They're inner Clinton. They're inner
masking,
Obama.
Like the only place you will see a lot of people wearing masks is at a progressive rally. You won't see them at a Trump rally, for instance.
True.
Okay, so it's a very partisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's become partisan, and they're still talking about masking and social distancing, both of which have been disproven scientifically. There's no scientific basis for either of those at this point.
Not
Zero.
For this virus. Yep.
Zero.
Mm-hmm.
There's some mental illness things that map into that, but not science.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Now, coming in for a little bat up, Jay Bhattacharya, who you and I have met a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So
He's a great guy.
This just came out, and this is a slightly different flavor than what we heard from Tulsi.
Dr. Bhattacharya, you were one of the leading voices during COVID of sanity in the United States. Your reaction to China's desperate spin?
It's shocking, Laura. I mean, I guess what can you do? What happened was that the Chinese lab in Wuhan conducted some mad science experiments, unfortunately, partly funded by the American government. In fact, by the agency that I can now currently lead. And that experiment went astray. It leaked and caused the havoc that we faced for years. And for China to now turn around and say, well, the U.S. is to blame, and that, well, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The Chinese were responsible for allowing these experiments to happen in a low security lab. It leaked. They covered it up, and that's just a fact.
Okay, so that's interesting to me. But look at what he just said. He said unequivocally it came from their lab. The lab leak argument is now over.
Right.
I was right. They were wrong.
Right.
All those mean girl virologists, Angie Rasmussen, horrible person.
We're talking to you.
Yep. Christian Anderson, Ralph Barrick, Drosten, Marion Koopman, etc. All you virologists, all you losers, you're wrong. And you knew it all the time. And of course, that's why I really despise these people, is because they knew that this had to have come from a lab. And then they spent every ounce of their authority attempting to pretend that wasn't the case. So that was just awful. But we did also, the United States had a hand in this. We funded this. And by the way, the name that needs to keep coming up in this is Ralph Barrick. He is the godfather of the whole coronavirus manipulation scheme.
Mhm.
He transferred that technology to the bat lady over there in Wuhan, China.
That's
This
right.
was a collaborative effort
That's
between
right.
these two. We have to keep that in sight.
Yes, that's such a good point. There was a good comment up here.
Oh, yeah.
By TB, I think it was. If you go up a tiny bit, right there at the top. Yes.
This one?
Yes. TB says it was a horrible time for this planet. Not only the needless deaths, we're all mentally scarred from the era. I will never forget people wanting to round up unvaxxed.
You and me both.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Thanks. Thanks for the comments.
And by the way, it turns out that horse paste, you can rub it topically on too. It works really well against certain types of rosacea acne, polycystic acne, and rosacea. Rosacea and that it's skin conditions. It's amazing, and there's some evidence that people have been using it, neither suggesting you should or shouldn't. Have been using it in cases of skin cancers. So just saying, there's lots coming out about that. And if we had Honest Science, we would already know about that. But back to that part, Evie. So this is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Do you remember? So that first part up top there in 2019, remember this? I remember this, but I forgot about it. A number of U.S. states reported mysterious e-cigarette or vaping lung injury cases. Do you remember that?
The popcorn lung.
The popcorn lung.
Was that
just
a
came
real
and went?
thing?
We never talked about it ever again. It just came. Like some people mysteriously came down with, they thought it was vaping, but I'm like,
oh,
what was that?
Huh.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Anyway,
in 2019, a number of
can you go to the second one?
Sorry, excuse me. The U.S. CDC data indicates the first confirmed COVID-19 case in Florida was on March 1st, 2020. However, according to the data on 171 COVID-19 patients published on the Florida Department of Health website, the earliest confirmed cases were in January of 2020.
Well, hold on.
That's a big difference.
That's impossible, right? Because as they say here, they had no international travel history, but the official story of the first case in the United States is that this guy in Seattle, right? That had just traveled back over.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep. And that was when it all started, also in January of 2020. But how did we have cases in Florida among people who did? I mean, these seem to be confirmed cases. So China's saying, well, hold up. Now, this could easily be that what we really have to talk about is that it didn't escape in January, but possibly in August of 2019. And then it would have had more time to travel around the world and spread. And by the way,
because there were those military exercises, right?
Yeah, in October.
And there were things that were going on that I remember hearing that people that were at those, that attended those, have been sick.
So let's imagine it's escaped earlier. And of course they know it because, they're all in communication with each other. The Mean Girls Virology Club has a set of bat phones and they talk to each other, right? And so is it then too conspiratorial to suggest that's why the Event 201 planning exercise decided for the first time to focus on a coronavirus outbreak?
Right, and not something else.
And not something else like Ebola. They'd always focused on these other things before, like a H5N1 flu or Ebola or something. We'd never had a worldwide coronavirus outbreak, but they made that the subject of their Event 201, which Gina Haspel was at, and George Gao, the CDC equivalent in China, and all the representatives from pharma and the National Security Council and newspapers and things. At any rate. And then that last one down there.
A U.S. CDC study revealed that out of 7,389 serological survey samples collected from the 9 states between December 13th, 2019 and January 17th, 2020, 106 were SARS-CoV-2 antibody positive. This suggests that the virus existed in the U.S. before the official case was identified. All right.
Well, so now we have questions. That's just science. So these parts I thought were legit because they actually point to stuff I can go find out and look at.
You can double check and make sure that's actual data.
Yeah, but the COVID story was BS from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
The whole, we just found out about it in December and then we got an email from China and 48 hours later we had our first vaccine. Like none of that happened. That was all pure bunk, junky bunk. So then this is the second part of what Jay said.
That was a question mark in my mind that stuck with me ever since.
Well, I mean, I think the American people deserve to know, as you said, Laura. And President Trump, he made it one of his promises to the American people. He's delivering. We are going to make sure that the American people know the full story, at least as far as the American side is concerned, of what led to the pandemic. And let the chips fall where they may. What we need to do, actually, and this is again something that President Trump is going to deliver and is delivering, is that we have to never again act in the ways that we did in the run-up to the pandemic, in ways that put all of the world in danger of causing a pandemic by doing mad science experiments.
So that's good. So let the chips fall where they may. But he's saying we have to stop these mad experiments, right? And he's in a position to do that now. So go, Jay. Really hopeful. But we have been like, there's some dark forces on this planet, I think. Something dark. You have to be really dark to say, you know what would be a good idea, Evie? I'm going to monkey with a virus in a way that will make it more pathogenic for humans. I'm going to kind of do it sloppy, and so that it has a chance of escaping. And when it comes out, we won't have had millions and millions of years of cat and mouse evolutionary back and forth. This is a brand new math problem that gets thrown into our genome that you suddenly have to like wrestle with, right? And we still don't know the impact of this, but lives were shortened, myocarditis, pericarditis, cancers,
babies were
immunological,
lost, all sorts of stuff.
But then the really dark part is finding out that the spike protein was specifically engineered to be toxic, and that was then used in its full form, and not one, not two, but every single vaccine candidate produced by the West.
Yep.
All decided magically to use the whole toxic spike protein.
Yeah, that is darkness.
You can't square that up with
any darker.
with anything. We take a quick peek at this week at Peak. Our fat pipe, a lot of fun, lots of comments going on around that. Paul and I discussed talking about, is there a coming recession? What does that actually look like? And of course, if you haven't seen the Adam Rosenzweig piece, that's really catching fire, doing really well over on our Peak Financial Investing channel on YouTube, doing really well. And then on Wednesday, Evie and I had another Signal Hour. This is the Friday edition. So we talked about this admission of chemtrails and geoengineering, tariffs, tinfoil, but then we talked about some 9/11 truths and the hard times that are coming.
Yes.
And by the way, we only have a couple minutes here, but we're going to do roast of the week. You ready? This is my fave. Do you remember who Jasmine Crockett is? She's the Congress lady. So
she's crazy. All right. She says, RFK Jr. says fluoride makes you stupider. Interesting take from a man actively proving it's not the water, it's the policy. This ain't healthcare. It's headline chasing with a government badge.
So this is my most favorite community notes of all time.
Unfortunately, fluoride does have long-term neurotoxic effects.
Oops.
Also, wig glue, if used excessively, can also cause neurological problems, which is what likely led Congressman Jasmine Crockett to post this. No, that's not even real, but that's totally hysterical. Is it really?
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was my fave roast of the week there.
Oh boy, Jasmine.
And just to clear this up too, you remember we talked about stochastic terrorism, which is when a public official is using veiled but not that veiled kind of language, like it sure would be a shame if something happened to Elon, right?
Yes.
And in the hopes that one of their faithful hears that and does the right thing and creates violence. Okay, that's stochastic terrorism.
Yep.
Pritzker is the very unfortunate character who is the governor of the fine state of
New Hampshire.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization.
He's speaking in New Hampshire, but he's Illinois.
Disruption. But I am now.
He's calling for mass protests and disruptions. Boomer stands up, of course. Nice to see. Another boomer. Look at them popping up like orcas.
These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace.
These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace.
They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box.
So, yeah. This is what stochastic terrorism looks like and sounds like when it's getting practiced.
Great.
So
I'm disappointed in people like that.
I am too. So at this point, hey, adios amigos out here on the public side. We're going to be turning now to the private side, and we're going to be talking about three big things here. We've got the enemies within. We'll go a little further into that. Evie, you and I were going to be talking about how to be resilient in our own local efforts here. We got to talk about what's going on in Canada. And then also there's some surprisingly strong economic data that just came out today.
Okay.
So, and Trump's crowing about it. And so the question is that real? Is it Memorex?
Sure, let's
what are we
go
looking
there.
at? So with that, thank you very much for everybody else for being here on the Signal Hour with Evie and I, and out here in the public side. Peak Prosperity subscribers.
See you again on Friday.
Wednesday.
Oh.
It is Friday.
Oh, I mean Wednesday. Sorry.
So
oh my gosh.
Wednesdays and Fridays, Signal Hour. And